Thank you for joining the Chair Chronicles podcast. I'm Carla D. Tillery, your life coach and your favorite auntie. This episode is part of a 4-part series on Have You Had the Talk? The talk is a common expression in the Black community, but usually it's focused around having those conversations with your children about racism. But we need to have more of the talk. So, this series deals with having the talk with our families about unexpected and expected deaths of a loved one, having the talk with our children about racism, having the talk with our family and friends about the psychological impacts of living while Black, and also having the talk about the economic pitfalls that face the Black community. Hi, LA.
Hey.
So we're going to continue in our Have You Had the Talk series.
Great.
This is another episode connected with that on Have You Had the Talk.
Love it.
And I'm so excited because today we get to talk about Have You Had the Talk about your finances?
Good one. Yes.
A lot of people don't like to talk about their money.
Another one of those difficult conversations, but we have to have it.
We have to have it. And we'll see what the differences are because you're single and I'm married.
Yeah.
And having the talk with who and how. That's going to be interesting when we talk about...
Well, I can talk to myself about my finances. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So as a result of COVID, we know that there's been so many impacts to so many families across the world.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of shutdowns that have been going on.
Yeah.
A lot of industries across the planet have been impacted.
Absolutely.
And even those that we thought might have been safe are not safe anymore.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, a lot of times, when you think about different careers, like which career path would be, the least impacted by something, tragic happening. Mm-hmm. And you think about the essentials.
Yes.
Right? So food. Right? Food and water, that type of thing.
Right.
You think about the healthcare industry being a safe industry. I mean, everybody is being impacted, even though the healthcare field still is ongoing, right? And more so very robust. Right. But food?
Right.
Really has been impacted.
Big time. And we see it.
Yeah, the restaurants, if they did not have outdoor dining and seating, they have been drastically impacted.
And we're seeing long-standing restaurants closing their doors.
Right.
Yeah.
The retail. Now, I know retail pre-COVID, it started to change with a lot of the big box online type of distribution centers and things like that. But, retail is taking a plunge.
Big hit.
A big plunge now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So seeing a lot of vacancies in terms of buildings, the big box. It's just looking very empty out there now.
It really is. And it's actually scary because, behind those industries closing, there's faces, there's families,
right?
Where there's one breadwinner.
Right. And so what do they do now?
Yeah.
And have they been having the talk about their finances?
Right. Have they saved for what they call the rainy day?
The rainy day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been raining since March.
A whole lot.
It's been raining.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I think I've worked with some people that I know have not been very comfortable talking about their finances. And I don't know what it was like for you growing up. When I grew up, listening to my parents, I did hear certain conversations because, of course, I grew up in the era where you don't be listening to no grown folks.
You mind your business, right? You mind your business.
And if you
when
heard
grown
something,
folk talking, you
had to keep it shut.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
you were lucky if you could be in the room.
Right.
But I did have an opportunity to kind of hear more. And me and my dad talked a lot about business and about finances. He's the one who really has given me a lot of insights over the years. And to this day, we still are very open about what's happening with our finances and helping each other at this point. So, it's been... it's interesting growing up and kind of learning whether you could have that talk comfortably.
Right.
And both my parents worked. I was fortunate. I grew up and I was a latchkey kid. So yeah, I was coming home by myself.
Right.
Because both my parents were out working.
Right.
So, but they both brought in an income to support the household.
Right.
So I saw that. So that has kind of like been my model.
Right.
I did not have the, even the interest per se to be a stay-at-home mom, even though I know that works for many, many families.
Right.
I think my model as my mom would, I saw her go to work. She was a teacher.
Okay.
And so seeing her get up and go to work, my dad was doing that. And they shared everything, in terms of household responsibilities and taking care of us. And even on the cooking, both my mom and my dad cook. Yeah, so I saw this kind of like mutual agreement between them two.
Yes.
I would hear them talk about vacations and planning that together.
Right.
Talking about different bills and different things they wanted to do around the house. So that was my model set.
Right.
So I adopted it because it looked like it worked.
And obviously it did.
It did.
Yes. So and as for myself, my mom stayed home for many years. My sister is handicapped, so my mom, once we were old enough to be around, and she was able to then forage out and get a job of her own, but held the home down and and did her part, and it's the same thing. We didn't know what a bill was. We didn't, but again, my dad was, he's awesome with money. He was the money man, and he really, taught us about, when you get your allowance and how to save and, and how you, put a little bit here and a little bit there. So, I grew up with that as well, and, and working for what you want, but not spending it all.
Right. Because money don't grow on trees.
Every
goodness. Time I ask for something.
Exactly.
And I know my parents are going to be listening.
Right.
So money don't grow on trees. That's what I heard.
And I wasn't paid to do chores. I'm just going to let you know now. I didn't get money to wash the dishes, but it does. You think about, how children are being raised today. There are some households where the child knows about the bill collector.
Yes.
And I believe that we should expose our children to saving, and you can teach them that as young as 5 years old. As far as I'm concerned, you can show them how you put a little jar and
that's right.
But I don't believe that a child should be exposed to the harsh realities at that age of we can't pay this bill,
right?
So there's definitely a balance when we talk about savings, and
it is a balance. And I think I knew they talked about money,
right?
But I do think that I was protected from a lot of different things,
right?
But they also would let me know when they didn't have it. I mean, that was very clear in terms of messaging about stop asking for things when we go to the store,
right?
Because you can't get it because money don't grow on trees.
Exactly. Let's have this talk before we get out of the car. Do not, right?
And so and I think taking what I experienced as a child and then morphing it into what my husband and I had in terms of our conversation with our children about money, it's grown and it's become more enhanced.
Right.
And so, like you were saying in terms of you might not have known what a bill was.
Right.
On the, I think contrary to that, we also didn't know what good credit was.
Right.
And that's, it's so important that you do have the talk.
Yes.
Because I think there's a way that you can put it in context without making children feel like they have the responsibility or the burden.
Right.
But have an understanding of what real life
is
really
all about.
Is like.
Yeah.
So something very similar to what's happening now in COVID. We were sitting around the dinner table. I forget how old I was, maybe about 11 or 12 years old. We were having family dinner, listening to the TV, listening to the news. And my father found out that the store he was working for was closing.
Wow.
We heard it on the news. We all heard it together. I have just small memories of kind of like the impacts of that.
Right.
I know a lot of it was shock.
Yeah.
For my father and my mom to learn that now 2 household income is now becoming 1.
Right.
Right. And so there were a lot of changes that started to happen in our family as a result of that.
Right.
And the most obvious was seeing my dad home more.
Right.
Because he wasn't working. But he was actively looking, and fortunately it wasn't too long after that when he found, other type of work to do.
Right.
So yeah, it was interesting though, I think, to kind of have that reflection and understanding now what's happening with COVID, with people having that same experience.
Yes.
Realizing that your income is either cut in half or cut all together.
Yes. Yeah.
Devastating.
It is.
Devastating.
It is. And without proper preparing for that rainy day.
Right.
We go about and we get our bonuses, or, we're working extra hours to bring in extra income. What are we doing with that?
What are we doing with it? And so many of us are living check to check.
Yeah.
That it's so hard to even carve out. I've heard so many different kind of pushes in different community organizations and at churches and other places.
Yeah.
You need to save, you need to do this with your money. And you hear the talk about it, but then in terms of applying it, I think sometimes there was a bit of a gap with that.
Yeah. And I think the other part of that too is everyone's situation is different. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, there's some trepidation of listening to those kind of seminars and things like that, because you're like, I don't have a lot of money.
Right.
So, that doesn't apply to me. Or, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I can't barely save $2.
Right.
So you mean to tell me I'm supposed to save 10% of my check, or, so again, situational.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, so I think the important thing is to not be afraid to talk about it, because I feel like hiding under the covers is the worst thing that we can do when it comes to dealing with our finances. Is to not face it head on. And as much stress and anxiety as it brings, it's still a necessary kind of confrontation, so to speak.
Yes.
Confront that dollar.
That's it.
And figure out what you need to do, because there are so many resources. And I feel like so many times we don't get started because we don't feel like we're in the position. Right. To even plan, to even kind of prepare for a rainy day, to kind of put those necessary things in place, because we're like, we don't have enough to do that. We just trying to barely pay bills, and the collectors are calling and this and that.
Right.
And I think so oftentimes I've talked with, some of my friends, and, because I have a strong message about finances and knowing what's coming in, what's going out. Even if it's going out on the wrong things, at least know it.
At least know it.
At least know it.
Know where your money's going.
And so I remember talking with my friend about, she was like, I need to save money and blah, blah, blah. And she was really trying, and she was single.
Yeah.
And I said, you could do it. I was like, so let me sit down with you. So I sat down with her. Yeah. We went through her finances. I'm a spreadsheet girl.
Yes.
So I pulled out Excel. Oh, yes. We did the number crunching and all of that. And I was like, if you put this away, I was like, you can have almost $10,000 by the end of the year. She couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And I said, but we got to do this, and this to get you on the road to where you can do that. Mm-hmm. Some of it was cutting back a lot of excess. Right. And then one of the things I realized when I was working with her was that she wasn't paying her cell phone bill off at the end of the month. And that's a big no-no for me. And I don't know why that's a pet peeve, but I'm like this. If you talking that much that you can't pay it off, you need to hang up your phone.
Right. You're talking entirely too much.
Too much. So that's an auntie kind of conversation. Yes. Listen, if you cannot pay your cell phone bill off at the end of the month and pay it in full, something is wrong.
Right.
Why are you carrying over charges for a conversation that you had 35, 40, 45 days ago?
I love it. I love it. We need to have you start a class. I'm telling you. But it's true.
It's like true. You can't pay for a conversation you had 30 days ago.
Yeah.
So we've got to rearrange a little bit of our priorities. Mm-hmm. We've got to have better control and management over our finances and what we're spending it on. Yeah. We need to be looking for options and alternatives to always find ways to cut back. And we have to.
Yes.
You can't hide under the rock. You can't hide under the covers and say, I can't do it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
It's a big no-no.
Not no, I can't.
And you know what? Just like we have goals for our career, where we see ourselves in 5 years, it should also be a goal for what your finances look like. What are my financial goals? am I the person that wants to be able to travel? Okay, well, in order to travel, you have to have
right.
So
money.
what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing? Or I want to start a business. So there has to be, you have to understand what your money style is, I believe, and then also determine what are your financial goals. It's not all about putting it in a savings account.
Right.
How about investing?
That's right. And that is something that we, don't have a lot of knowledge about.
Right.
And so there are some things that are going to push you, that are going to challenge you to kind of do some research, to kind of find the right people who can give you some guidance and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but look, you can always Google it. I know there's a lot of false information out there, but Google it and you will get at least on the pathway to sort of finding out some good information about what you can do.
Right. And connect with others who are either in the financial business or they like you said, you have a spreadsheet. Oh, I didn't think about that. Well, how did you set it up? Maybe they can send you a template.
Right.
So there are many, many resources, but like you said, we have to take our head out of the sand and listen, we've all been there. We've all made some horrible financial mistakes.
Absolutely.
But you can recover.
And you can recover. And we're not, I don't present myself even as an expert on
Not
this.
at all.
I'm just presenting this as a, learn from some of my mistakes.
Right. And don't make the same mistakes I did.
Right.
Yes.
So one of the things, particularly that's happened, research is saying right now that there's almost a little under 13 million people in the United States unemployed. That represents a lot of households.
It's mind-boggling. That's
13 million people. Wow. And so with that, you gotta there's this huge understanding that there are a lot of people that are suffering right now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that need resources. There are a lot of people that don't know how they're going to make ends meet. Thankfully, with COVID, there's been some kind of relief in terms of not only through the stimulus, but also with landlords to not evict people and some of the services for utilities and things like that cannot turn the services off.
Right.
So that's been a little bit of a help, but I think, we still need to kind of figure out how do we help people move forward.
Yes.
How do we help our sister? How do we help our brother? How do we help, that neighbor or that friend or that family member that really still has to regroup?
Right.
Regroup.
Right. And let them know that, you're not alone in this. There are people out here, there are resources out here to help you. And I've been touched with being unemployed, definitely not during this crisis, thank you God, but I've been on that end of having to file for unemployment and have to wait weeks and I'm very much independent. I don't run to my parents for things, so I've been in tight places, and it's a scary place to be, but like you said, it's about it's about facing our fears about our finances, and we can do it.
We can do it.
Yeah.
It will require patience. It will require a little bit of kind of hardening of the heart, because I think sometimes you'll start to see yourself differently when you don't feel like you have the money to that you want to have to sort of control and manage things that are going on. It can really hit your self-esteem hard,
big time.
Your self-worth and your self-value.
Right.
And this is not the time to sort of point fingers at yourself.
Not at all.
This is time for you to say, okay, what can I do?
Right.
It's not about what you
Taking
can't do.
action.
It's about what can I do now moving forward.
Right.
And I think for couples, you've got to be able to face it together and sort of say, we're in this together. Because it doesn't matter who has the income or where it's coming from. At the end of the day, that's the household income.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing that I've seen is like this division of money. Right?
Okay.
And my husband and I, while each one of us brings a different set of income into the household, that's irrelevant to the fact that it's our household income.
Right.
So I can't look at him and say, this is what I'm going to do because this is my money. I mean, sometimes we want to.
Right.
But when you're married, it really is a conversation that you have to have with your spouse.
Right.
And you also have to understand who has the skills, which skills in myself or my husband, and that needs to really have an eye over the finances, right? Because in some cases, one partner, that might not be their strength.
Right.
And I solely believe in utilize the strength of your partner, particularly for couples.
Right.
Use the strength of your partner. If your strength isn't money, please don't handle the money.
Don't do that.
And I'll say this, even if it's the man, if he's, the breadwinner and all of that, but if he's not good with managing money, he does not have to manage it. It's okay. And it doesn't mean you're less of a man.
Right.
It means you're man enough to say that my partner has the right skills and I'm going to utilize the skill. You're making the decision of how it's being handled. You're still representing yourself as head of household to say, you know what? I'm going to utilize my partner because that's her best skill.
Right.
You're still making the decision. And I haven't had to have that conversation over and over so men do not feel like they're devalued if they're not managing the money. If that's not your skill set, it's okay.
Right.
I'd rather you be the head of the household and make sure it happens.
Right.
It's delegation.
Right. Well, let me ask this personal question. So, did you have the talk? Did you and Chris? Did you and your husband have that talk before you got married? What were your goals? Okay.
We talked about that before we got married. I was on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. I can tell you did.
I was on it. We talked about that. Yeah. It's funny because, I was in school at the time getting my degree. And this was the ongoing joke. He was like, you're going to have to make so much amount of money by this time. He was putting like that demand on me because he knew I was in school and I'm doing all this talking. But anyway, that was just a joke.
Right.
But yeah, we did talk about it. Okay. We talked about it quite often, actually. We were both very open. And one of the things when we got married, I was bringing in some debt. Because sister
it's
gotta
cool.
look good.
Yeah, right.
And so I unfortunately, it's nothing really to brag about, but y'all know what
we've all done it. Right.
I unfortunately had some debt that I was bringing into the marriage. I couldn't hide it. I was smart enough to know that that's not something you hide.
Right.
So I was very upfront with what I had on my plate. I also wanted to go to grad school after we got married. Okay. So I knew immediately I was not bringing in income.
Right.
So we had to have that conversation. Will this work? Will we be able to live off one income? That sort of thing.
Right.
So we were very open and very transparent. Good. And so was he. He was very transparent about his income, what the bills he had, and what the expectations would be for both of us. Interestingly, so here we go. We get married and I'm in grad school. And at that time, there was no such thing as like these phone plans that had unlimited minutes. Oh yeah, you were paying for every single minute you was on the phone. So I know I'm outdating myself because that goes way back.
Yes.
So I was one of those who, again, I relocated, many states away.
Right.
And so in order for me to stay in contact with my mom and my dad, I had to use the telephone.
Right.
So I was racking up that telephone bill. And he looked at it one month and he was like, you're going to have to get a job because we cannot.
Just for your phone.
just so that I could call home.
Yeah.
So, and I ended up doing that, right? Because I was like, I'm not going to stop talking.
Right.
So I got to figure this out.
Got to pay for this bill, right?
Yeah. So, but we've always had like those honest conversations about where we are with our money.
Right.
And the one thing we do, we try to sit down regularly.
That's good.
To really talk about it. Because things change.
Yes.
And this is what I would say, particularly for couples, is that sometimes you can make an agreement. Don't just think that that's going to hold you because things change. Right? And so you've got to have frequent conversations to make adjustments over time.
Right.
So if you get married and your husband says, okay, I'm going to take care of you. You don't have to work. And then something happens. Maybe he gets sick or maybe he's not getting, increases in his salary to keep up with inflation and the rising costs.
Right.
It might mean that you need some type of supplemental income.
Right.
And you got to make that decision. Well, do I go to work? Do I find some part-time? Do I go full-time? Does he pick up a part-time job and then he's not home? And then I'm stuck here with the kids, raising the kids, and they don't see dad. Like, so many different things happen.
Yes.
So you have to continue having the talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not one and done.
Right.
Because my husband and I have had so many things over the course of our 20 plus years of marriage that have altered how we handle our money.
Right. Right. And see, coming from the single perspective, it's the same type of planning that you have to have.
But who you talking to?
You have the hard talk with yourself. Especially when you look at your checkbook and you're constantly like, okay, this is not adding up, and then you reach out to others who, have set budgets for themselves. And let's just be clear, that there are, girlfriends, an aunt or an uncle or someone who has done it. You've seen them do very well, with their finances. They're talking about, how they've saved or how they've invested and things. Pick their brain.
That's right.
Google things. Take a class. I mean, there's free classes at the high schools that that we've all gone to, that you can, a money market class or, a budgeting class. Those are everywhere.
Yes.
So, there's no excuse. There is no excuse. But again, it's like having that honest conversation and that honest look at where you are financially. And especially depending upon your age. Yeah, when you're in your 20s, you're working just to be able to buy clothes and, go to the club and, go to the movies and go out to eat, and, as someone that's in their 50s, I'm thinking, I don't plan on working past retirement. I pray not, so I have to think long term. What does that look like? Right. Will I be able to comfortably be able to just take, God forbid, Social Security goes away, then what?
Exactly. And I think beyond making sure that we are dedicating savings, we are also not dedicating finances and resources for after we're finished working, like you said, the retirement. What does our future look like? Right. What is our living style? Yeah. What do we want it to be? Right. What will it require to support that? Right. I want to travel, so I know I've got to start putting some money away now. Right. So that, Chris and I have that opportunity to have those resources available to travel where we want to go without having the heartache, without having the anxiety, without wondering how we're going to do this. And so you've got to think about, your retirement income and what that looks like. And so many people do not plan for that.
They don't.
They don't plan for the retirement. They don't plan for even medical as associated with being in the older age and what that might need to look like, because some of these government programs right now, one, they sometimes fall short of what your medical needs may be. Right. And then secondly, we don't know if they're going to be around. I mean, with all the different leaderships that we've had across this country, every time Social Security comes up and they're talking about reducing the funding for that and eliminating it over time. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. And as a single person, you also, yes, I am putting it out in the atmosphere, even among COVID, wherever you are, Boaz, I'm here. I'm still here, but you also want to have yourself in a position that, say, for instance, you don't get married. Will you be able to take care of yourself? And let's just be clear. We all have a lifestyle. Regardless of whether you're sitting at home eating bonbons or you're working 3 or 4 jobs. There is a lifestyle that you want to maintain and have. And so it really is about reducing the amount of debt. Yes. To your income ratio. And I know it's hard for, someone that has lost their job. They can't even think about that. But you have to. You have to think about it and say, listen, it won't be like this always.
Right. So there are 3 things you should understand relative to your financial picture. Right. One is, what is your income? Yes. And if you're living in the household and you're in a partnership or married, you should kind of understand what that total income is coming into a household. Right. And then what are those expenses?
Yes. That's a big one.
Where is our money going? Right. And most of the time when I talk to people,
where is it going?
It is going to a lot of entertainment. Oh, yeah. And it's going towards food. Huh. Especially for family households.
Wow.
You know what happens? We go to the grocery store, we buy a bunch of food, and then we're too tired to cook it. So then what do? We pick up the phone and we order out. Or we go out. Yes. And so now we've got like this double kind of expense for food because we're too tired to cook. That has happened to me so many times. Wow. But when I'm working with different couples and we go through that spreadsheet and we look at how much you spend at the grocery store and then how much you spend eating out, the eating out is just as much.
Right.
And so what that tells me is that we're purchasing food, but we're not cooking it.
Wow.
And you know, it's that syndrome of going to the grocery store without a list. And you walk up and down the aisles and then you pick up everything in sight.
Your basket will be full.
And then what happens? Sometimes the same day you go to the grocery store, you end up ordering out.
I have done it. That is something though.
So a lot of expenses, it really is going towards food and it's uncontrolled in terms of how much we're actually spending on food. Right. So that's kind of some of the main areas. And then the other thing, so I said income, right? Expenses. The other thing is you need to know your debt. Now, there have been so many times that people say, oh, I'm good, blah, blah, blah. You know, we've got enough money coming in to handle our expenses. And then I said, well, how much debt are you in? And it's like crickets. They don't have a good handle on how much do they owe. And so what happens is we're paying the minimum on credit cards. Right. We have a number of credit cards that are open, a number of accounts that are open with outstanding balances, and we're just paying the minimum. And then we're paying all of this interest, and we think we're good because we can afford the minimum. Right. But we're actually increasing the debt over time because of interest and because of that reoccurring balance. Ugh. And so it's not enough just to know your income and expenses. You have to understand how much debt are you in. Right. Right. And do you have a debt plan to reduce it, eliminate it?
Isn't that something? We put that in a box over there because we don't want to talk about
Nobody wants to talk about because nobody wants to deal with it. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then it's the worst. You know, it's like that baby elephant that gets bigger, 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 and bigger. Right. Because many times what we do is we max out one card, and what do? We open up another credit card.
Exactly.
Oh, and they'll give it to you.
Oh, don't have that zero balance and I can transfer.
Oh, they will give it to you. Right. You get all these promotional offers and things like that. And it was so interesting. I was talking with my son about this, and he had paid off one of his credit cards, and then they increased his limit. I said, yeah, because they want you to spend some more money. Yeah. Right.
They want you to keep spending.
And while it's good because it it shows that you've got some discipline and that you can manage it. Right. But on the flip side, what the credit card companies are essentially doing is allowing you more of an opportunity to get in more debt. Right. Because they're like, oh, you paid that off. So
let's give you a little bit more.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a balance, right? Because you need to establish credit. Right. That's important. Right. But you need to establish good credit.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Good credit. Right. And even not paying your utilities and things like that impact your credit.
Yes, they do.
So you need to establish good credit. Right. So it's a fine balance still of making sure you don't have your availability of credit right to hurt you, particularly if you're looking for a home. Right. So it could hurt you as well. Yeah. Even though you don't have a balance.
This is good. This is good. It's about knowing. You really have to be in the know.
You have to know. So knowing your income, knowing your expenses, and understanding your debt so you can get a plan. Yes. And I think the other thing that you brought out is highly important is having some goals. Yeah. What are your financial goals for the household? Right. What are your individual goals? Right. You know, what agreements have you made with your spouse about how much is, an expendable, kind of allowance that we don't need to confer on? Right. What's that dollar amount where I can go out and get this up to and then be okay? But if it's beyond that, then we need to have a conversation because most of the time there is a threshold where it's going to impact the other person at some point or another because it's going to hit either the expense column or that debt column.
Right. And we don't want it in the debt column.
And we don't want it there. Right. So having the talk about finances with your household is important.
Right.
I think finding that right conversation with your children at different age levels is appropriate.
It is.
And, it might be a different message, but I think teaching them about money, teaching them about credit, teaching them about goals, particularly teaching them about savings.
Oh my gosh.
Is important.
Yes.
I mean, that is something I get on my, they know I'm a broken record when it comes to savings.
Right.
Because you never know.
Yeah.
And when things like this happen, unexpected tragedy happens that affects so many people.
Right.
We want to be positioned well, where we can manage it and still hold our head up and not fall apart.
Right.
So many people are falling apart.
Yeah.
Because it really is devastating to see so many industries, from manufacturing to retail to food, the food industry. And I was just listening to a report about how the airline industry was impacted, right?
Right, yes.
So, but I'm just thinking like just the flight itself, right?
Right.
What I didn't realize is that all of those supporting industries, like the companies that do the peanuts and the snacks, they've got storehouses now, warehouses full of products because they have not been able to get it out to the airlines because there are fewer planes, it's a lot less travel. Right. So it's impacting those other industries that support the airline industry.
Right.
So that's a lot of people in manufacturing and things like that. And then you've got, of course, those businesses and restaurants and things like that in the airport.
Right.
And then cutting down fewer people altogether. So that need to kind of oversee, or manage the planes coming in and out. Yeah. So it is just this ripple effect of what has happened and really causing us to really make sure we understand our finances, that we can pivot quickly, that we can go into a reserve and pull some money out when we need to. Right. And sometimes you just have to come up with a different strategy.
You do. A different strategy. And like you said, it takes work, but it's doable.
It's
doable. So, get out there and find those resources, ask questions, seek those answers that you need, and don't be afraid to confront what's in front of you. You have to look at your finances. We all have to do it. We all have to do it. Yeah.
So, have you had the talk about your finances? I hope you're not one who is sort of hiding behind the fact that this is something that you need to deal with. Face it. We want to support you. Share your stories. Share your comments with us. We can share some resources that we are aware of in terms of different training opportunities and different resources that will give you the information you need to hopefully help you make the right decisions for you and your household. Whether you're married or whether you're single, it is an important conversation to have with someone else or with yourself.
That's right. You better.
And sometimes even if you're married, you still need to talk to yourself and say, you need to stop.
Get out of the store.
You need to get out the store, get off the online shopping.
Right.
Because I think that's a new thing right now.
Amazon, you are the devil.
It's like all you got to do is click, and click.
That's it.
And then guess what happens? There's a door package.
Yep.
The door is not.
Put it around the back under the stairs. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, we're always like, who ordered something now? It's a package coming every day. Okay, I digress. But anyway, share your comments and let us hear your stories because we know that this is important and we want you to have the talk about your finances. Don't hide from it. Confront your money and handle it well. So thank you for joining this episode with us on the Chair Chronicles. We're so happy that you tuned in. We hope that you would like and share this podcast. And please tune in for another episode of
The Chair Chronicles.